In this video, I'm going to replace the sway bar links in my 2012 Nissan Pathfinder. I'm doing this because I got the in-province inspection done and they said my sway bar links were loose. Here are the parts, a K80471 and a K80470. You can see I got an extra jack. I've already got it jacked up with an axle stand under it. I did pick up a new jack for this job. Kind of spoiled myself. I got a breaker bar with a super long attachment. I got a 17 mil wrench. I got a 19 mil wrench. I got a crowbar, vice grips, and a hammer that I don't really use. I do use a lot of the penetrant spray. I did pick up a grease gun and grease because these have grease nipples on them. And I got these Grippas gloves. And it's important that you have a torque wrench that can go to 65 foot-pounds. So you can see the old sway bar end links right there. There's two bolts holding them in place, one right there, and there's an upper bolt as well right there. So very accessible and very easy to get at as long as the tire's off. So for the 17 mil, you only need this for the OEM parts. If you have the Moog parts that I got, you don't need the 17, it's all 19 mil stuff, but to get the original ones off, you need the 17. So it goes on the actual nut, and then for the 19 mil, that goes on the back side. So you can see slots in right there, and you definitely need that because it'll start spinning once you loosen the nut a little bit. So I'm just going to show you this price difference here. I originally got the passenger side one, so right front passenger side, from Nissan, the K80471 part, which they describe as their premium part, for $97.99, after tax $110.73. Went home, went online, did a little research. I brought that part back, so you can see it here again, K80471, and this is from Rock Auto for $17.70. So I got both of the end links, and I got this drive belt for 80 bucks, shipped straight to my door, Canadian. So for less money, I got both of them and a belt, and I didn't even have to leave the house to get them. So Rock Auto for a big win. They don't sponsor this video. I do have some links in the description for all these parts. So I'm going to take the breaker bar with the 17 millimeter and just get the nut moving, and then I'll switch over to the wrenches here in a second. As soon as it breaks free, everything starts twisting. So you can see I just slotted the 19 millimeter wrench in there, and then I just come at it with the 17 millimeter wrench. For both the driver's side and passenger side, you know, there's always a spot you can put that 19 mil and it'll stick onto something, so you don't have to hold it or anything. You just kind of start turning it and it'll stop itself on some piece of metal in there. And you can see the upper one as well that's actually attached to the sway bar, and the 19 mil is just pinned against the body of the vehicle. So you can see I jacked it up a little bit just to loosen that sway bar link. If you just have it hanging, that sway bar link will be too tight and it'll be difficult to remove. So that's where the second jack comes in handy. And you can see it, obviously it's rusted out. And side by side with the new Moog part, you see the grease nipples there. The Moog part is a little bit beefier and obviously not rusted, so that's clutch. Now before putting the parts on the vehicle, I do just pump a little bit of grease in there. You can see I've already done the one side on this, and then I add a little bit of grease to the other and give them a wipe down. Not too difficult to slot the parts back in, because obviously the threaded portions can move around a little bit. I did find it easier to put the bottom in and then the top. And you can see it's oriented so that you could actually get to the grease nipple. If I had the sway bar link in the other way, you wouldn't be able to access the nipples. Now because these are not the original parts, these have a 65 foot-pound requirement for the torque spec, so just keep that in mind if you do get an aftermarket part, that it doesn't necessarily have the same torque spec as the OEM part that you're taking off. Now that I'm doing the Moog parts, I'm using the 19 mil wrench as well as a 19 millimeter socket, so everything's 19 millimeters here. And you can see the 19 mil wrench is in there. So with this ridiculously long socket extension, I bring the top and bottom bolts to 65 foot-pounds. Remove the jack, and then you gotta throw the wheel back on and drop the vehicle. So I've already turned the vehicle around here, and here's the front passenger side. You can see I've already hit it with the penetrant spray and then taken the breaker bar. I'm going to break the nuts loose. There you can see a plume of rust smoke come off that one. And I'll do the upper one as well. I find once you get them moving, you can actually just get in there with the wrench without too much difficulty. And you can see the 19mm wrench once again pinned into the steering components on the vehicle. And not too difficult, a little bit tight, but they're not bad. The Honda Pilot I had was way worse to get these off. This one was a little bit more stubborn, so I actually had to use the wrench and the breaker bar for a little while and then switch over to a 17mm wrench. So again, 19mm wrench on the back, 17mm wrench on the front. And no mystery here, keep turning until those nuts fall off. So just as a bit of a demonstration on this passenger side, you can see if I tap them with a hammer, they don't really move. I'm sure you can smack it super hard and pop those out, but once you get the jack underneath there and just lift everything up, it does take a lot of the pressure off the sway bar end link, and you can see it right there sort of lifting up. And now that that's done, you can just reach in there with your hand and just wiggle it out. So it's definitely beneficial to have two jacks. You don't need floor jacks like this. There's probably one in the trunk of your vehicle here as well. This is the one that was bad. You can see it's really loose and floppy on both of these ends here. And there they are side by each. You can see that they point in different directions, so you can't use the driver's side one for the passenger side one. And they're rusty, so that's fine. So once again, I'm going to add some grease to the passenger side one. I don't put in a lot. They do come pre-greased, but the grease that's in those actually look pretty dirty, so I will pump a little bit in and just get some of their old dirty grease out. Once grease comes out of the top, that's an indication that it's good enough. I also found that you should probably move these things around a little bit. Probably because they're in the packaging for so long, the boot kind of gets stiff. So I found it moving them around and make sure the boot isn't binding up is a good idea. With the jack in place, the end link slots in without too much difficulty. I'm sure it'd be pretty difficult if the jack wasn't there. And then just throw the 19mm nuts on, and same drills as before. Get the 19mm wrench on the backside, 19mm socket on the front. And this is going to get torqued down to 65 foot-pounds as well. Again, if you get a different part, just make sure that you know the actual torque specification for the part you get, because this is definitely specific to these Moog parts, and it is written right on the packaging. So look for those indicators for whatever part you get. Now the rest of the job is pretty straightforward. Like I said, 19mm wrench on the backside, 19mm socket on the front, torque it to 65 foot-pounds. Now you don't need a comically large socket extension and torque wrench like I got here. These are just the two things that I found handy and readily available in my garage. The Nissan dealership locally obviously charges $110 per part. So to have this job done at Nissan, you'd be paying $220 for parts Canadian. They also said it would be about an hour for one of them. I'm assuming by extension that's 2 hours for two of them. Shop rates are about $120 an hour. So you'd be looking at $240 in shop fees for a total of $460-ish Canadian to get this done. Obviously, I paid about $80 for the two parts as well as the accessory drive belt. So I figure I could do this for about $60 Canadian. And it took me also about 2 hours. It doesn't take that long. It's not too difficult. So overall, I think you could save almost $400 by doing this yourself in just a couple hours. Anyway, now that it's on, I'm going to put the tire back on and call this quits. Thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.